Not to sound like a complete boomer, but perhaps not everything needs to be remade, especially when you're not willing to be mean enough to be memorable.
You do what you have to do. Sabotage is encouraged. Resourcefulness counts.
Hi, I'm LadyJenevia, and on my channel, I talk about entertainment media. Today, I'm going to be doing a review of the new Cruel Intentions television series. I did not initially know that this series existed until I got an email saying that I had the press screeners added to my account, so I says to myself, let me have a look at this and do a review for my channel. I had originally thought that I might try to read the book, Les Liaisons Dangereuses, and include my feedback of that as well, and have it inform some aspect of how I would analyze this new series, but the Wicked book ended up taking me much longer to read than I initially expected. You can watch my video about that now, as it's already been posted to my channel. So I did not end up having time to add Les Liaisons Dangereuses to my to-do list. I have, however, seen Cruel Intentions multiple times, so I figured that that was an adequate enough foundation for watching this new series. And in fact, that ended up working out well enough because this new series is heavily trying to play on the appeal and nostalgia of that film with a number of references and Easter eggs, and yet it ultimately fails to deliver a strong enough voice or perspective that it needs to be able to stand out and maintain a lasting presence in the audience's memory. But before I make my case, let's first introduce this new series. In this new adaptation, Cruel Intentions follows the elite students of Manchester College, a Washington, D.C. adjacent university where reputation means everything. Fraternities and sororities are the gold standard, and two ruthless step-siblings, Caroline Merteuil and Lucien Belmont, will do anything to stay on top of the cutthroat social hierarchy. After a brutal hazing incident threatens the entire Greek life system, they'll do whatever is necessary to preserve their power and reputation, even if that means seducing Annie Grover, the daughter of the Vice President of the United States. Hearts will be broken, loyalties will be tested, and secrets will be revealed in this modern-day royal court that is Manchester College. So we have a few name changes, but there are definitely some similarities in the main players. Where once we had Catherine, we now have Caroline, the mean girl queen bee of this story, and the playboy stepbrother is no longer Sebastian, but instead Lucien. Our ingenue, Annette, is now Annie, and instead of being the daughter of the school headmaster, she's the daughter of the vice president. Cecile is now Cece, Blaine is now Blaze, and actor Sean Patrick Thomas has also returned to this story as a professor at Manchester College. Now, since I am prepping this review to be published when the review embargo lifts, which is the day before the entire season is released, there are quite a few do not reveals that I have to maneuver my way around. So, if you are watching this review after the season is out and you have seen the episodes and you are wondering why I'm not being more specific about what it is that I'm speaking about, that's why. Nonetheless, I'm still going to give a mild spoiler warning, so proceed if you are okay with that. Being that this is a television series instead of a film, I am understanding of the fact that certain modifications are bound to be made because it's a completely different task to tell a compelling, entertaining story that spans 8 episodes as opposed to a feature film that runs for 2 hours. As such, the supporting characters of Cece and Blaze are undoubtedly more interesting than their film counterparts because they have actual storylines that are able to stand on their own and allow the audience to get to know more about who those characters are than what you saw of them in the film. Blaze is played by Harlan Kim, whom I recognize straight away because I remember him from this show he did a while back called The Librarians that I had watched, and he played a really fun character on that series, which made him quite memorable. And I feel like he gave some of the best acting out of everyone in the main cluster of younger student characters. Cece was played by Sara Silva, and she was also very good, and these two were definitely putting in work and doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the student side of the story. I'm not saying that the other leads can't act, but I think it's more so a combination of things. I think that these two characters had material that was more interesting and gave them more to play and emote. There were more layers that were more effectively fleshed out in their storylines compared to the major 3 characters. But a lot of Blaze and Cece's respective storylines are on the do not reveal list, so I cannot really go into specifics. I found that the biggest disservice to both Cece and Blaze, though, was the fact that the show doesn't have as hard of an ending. There are certain parts of the story, particularly in regards to the material that focuses on the big 3, that are left open so as to try to continue them in a second season, but I need the people making the show to be serious for one moment. This is not a personal attack, but I need you to look at the state of the industry currently, particularly for streaming original series. The vast majority of them are being canceled after just one season. These companies have been taken over, and the industry at large has been infiltrated by a bunch of tech bros and Wall Street yuppies who have no true understanding of art or even show business as a machine, and the material conditions that are required for artists to be able to create art to a level of quality and in a timely manner so as to be able to properly satisfy the audience and become beloved by the audience. So regardless of whether or not I personally enjoy Cruel Intentions as a series, how many times are we going to go through this where a new streaming original series is released and it might not be the largest global sensation to ever be released, but the audience that it does resonate with really enjoys it, but it gets cancelled anyway? My Lady Jane, anyone? Your lead actress in this Cruel Intentions series, Sarah Catherine Hook, was one of the leads of First Kill, and there were a whole lot of angry viewers ready to fight when Netflix cancelled that. Let's just be honest with ourselves about the fact that Cruel Intentions should have been a limited series. The ending would have been able to be more impactful if you committed to a real finale instead of leaving all of these loose threads. The show feels confused in its approach, and I have to ask the question of what audience you were aiming for. A lot of the storytelling and the acting of the leads feels far more calibrated towards a younger audience that will not have the built-in nostalgia for the film and will simply watch this as yet another teen YA type of drama. But the sheer volume of millennial bait references shoved into this leaves me more confused because the big three in this series aren't striking or memorable enough in their storylines the way that you've had them perform the material and the total lack of visual flair in general of this show. You've brought back Sean Patrick Thomas, whose storyline follows a similar arc in the film of being introduced as a handsome good guy that gets sucked into mess orchestrated by ethically dubious people. There's also an episode where they introduced a guest character, and immediately I went, oh, I know for a fact that has to be the girl from Hocus Pocus. It's a different haircut, but the face is exactly the same. And sure enough, I checked the end credits of the episode to confirm that it was in fact Vanessa Shaw. Caroline in this show has the same necklace as Catherine. You've got Bittersweet Symphony playing in the opening and closing episode of this season. 'Cause it's a bittersweet symphony this life. Lucien has a fancy car just like Sebastian did, but unfortunately all you do by invoking these totems is remind the fans of the original film how much more gripping of a watch that is compared to this series. Also, a sidebar that is extremely specific to me. My favorite Martin Brest film is Meet Joe Black, and Claire Forlani was the female lead of that, so it was a very lovely surprise for me to see her pop up in this series as Caroline's mother. Was she playing an incredibly mean character? Yes, but I would have probably liked this show more if it had been focused on her being a complete menace to everyone, because anytime she was on screen, she had my undivided attention. But let me circle back to my feedback about the show in a general sense. Have you ever made yourself a cup of hot tea, but then you set that down and it sits for too long, and then you go to drink it and it has dipped to a lukewarm temperature? That was what watching this series felt like. The ingredients are not necessarily wrong, but it simply doesn't satisfy the way that it should. Being that this is a television series instead of a film, and you have a longer run time to fill, I understand wanting to give your main three characters a more expansive arc than what their counterparts had in the film. Catherine was an iconic villain. No regrets, no remorse, just here to be a problem. And she was fierce the whole time. Annette was the good girl Catherine wanted to corrupt and ruin purely out of spite, and Sebastian was the tool she used to accomplish that. If we place those two women on opposite ends of a spectrum, the way I would have preferred they approach developing those counterparts further for this television series would have been that you really crank them up so there is more of a contrast from when they are going to shift away from those archetypes. Caroline was simply not mean enough. If you write down the things she does in this season, yes, she is villainous on paper, but the energy behind that villainy was lacking. I needed her to relish in her misdeeds and take more pleasure in the damage she inflicts on others. They would put in these moments of trying to make Caroline more sympathetic or nuanced, but because her villainy was lukewarm, it didn't feel interesting. It just came across as confused in its execution, because you couldn't fully commit to her being heinous, where you could have either just rooted for her downfall or enjoyed the spectacle of her villainy, and then you want to try to make her sympathetic because, sure, she can be conniving, but her mother is very mean and hurting her feelings. But by the time the season is finished, again, Caroline is a villain, so I'm rooting for her downfall, but you don't fully commit to giving her that downfall because you've got a bunch of loose threads left in case you somehow get renewed for season 2, so I get no real catharsis. So what exactly did I watch for 8 episodes, and what was the purpose? And then with Annie on the opposite end of the spectrum, you start the season with her being uncertain of things as a freshman at this prestige university, which to me made no sense. She is the daughter of the vice president at a prestige university that's more or less supposed to be a fictional version of an Ivy League school as far as I could tell. She would undoubtedly have a plan upon entering that university. What was her major? And here's the thing, she may very well go to university and change her mind about her plans, but the way she's presented, it was like they shared nothing of note about her academic or professional ambitions. She's uncertain about so many things that it became borderline incomprehensible. You really want me to believe that the daughter of the second in command of the Empire's government wouldn't have some sort of game plan upon entering university, because she really just seemed to get shuffled wherever the story needed her to go. But there are far too few moments where it feels as though she was actively driving the direction of her own life. And yes, I understand that with all the scheming and manipulation that Caroline and Lucien get up to, those things are going to shift the trajectory of the people around them, which include her. There will be those ripple effects. But if you were to ask me what drives her, I wouldn't be able to tell you. And you really missed an opportunity to have them be those polar opposites of one another. If Caroline is the big bad villain of the series, but you have these slivers of a deeper, more nuanced side of her, the way that you could have flipped that for Annie is that she could begin the show as this morally upstanding do-gooder who wants to do the right thing, but then you drop her in this sleazy world and have her be tempted to do the wrong thing. Does being bad feel good to her? Does she have the moral fiber and conviction to stay the course, or will there be glimpses of a more insidious side of herself? That's interesting. That's how you use an 8-episode season with a longer runtime than a feature film. But it feels like they're so focused on keeping Annie as this good girl that is unknowingly at the center of Caroline and Lucien's game with each other, as well as Caroline's desire to maintain her high standing and keep the sorority good and up and running, that they did not give Annie enough variation in her character arc. But finally, we have Lucien. I really don't want to be mean here, but this was a rough watch, and not in a fun way. I've already made my case for how the series is absolutely trying to pull in fans of the original film, because you would not be putting in that many references if you were not trying to do so. In that film, Sebastian, like Catherine, was shown to take pleasure in the really awful things they would do. Sebastian ended up having a genuine connection and a transformative arc as a result of that. But Lucien, like Caroline, is not quite mean enough in this series. There's that element of nastiness missing. I need to see them relish in the antics they get up to. The only thing they really consistently show about Lucien is that he's highly promiscuous, which is not a crime in and of itself. He's kind of selfish, he's kind of rude, he'll make some snide comments here and there, but if you want to have those moments of exploring something deeper about him really resonate, or if you want him to have some sort of transformative arc, I needed there to be more of a contrast. Because by the end of the season, without giving away specifics because they're more or less all on the do not reveal list, I didn't feel like he was all that different of a person. So that would suggest to me that you've done one of two things. Either one, the amount of character flaws he has or negative behavior patterns are not severe enough to necessitate a significant transformation in his seasonal arc, or number two, you are playing a long game where you have a vision of him evolving, transforming, and growing in the next season or seasons that you have envisioned, but like I already explained, most new streaming series do not make it out of the season 1 gate, and this would have been much better off being a limited series. The work that was done for Cece and Blaze as characters was interesting enough for me to know that you absolutely had the capacity to do decent work for all of those characters, characters and the overall reimagining of the Cruel Intentions story as a series, but so many aspects of this series felt like they were at best, operating at a level of 6 out of 10. If you have any curiosity about this series though, I would of course still tell you to watch it regardless of my feedback. What you look for in a new series might be different from what I personally look for, but as someone who really wants for there to be more modern literary adaptations, I did not go into watching this show for the first time presuming that it would be something terrible or awful. I would have preferred that it be good, and then I could use it as yet another example of how modern literary adaptations are an elite concept and more of them should be greenlit. But unfortunately, this time around, it simply did not meet my hopes and expectations. But if it somehow defies the odds and gets a second season, perhaps we can circle back and see if it improves on some of the things that I had issues with. It wouldn't be the first time a show found more of its creative momentum after the first season. So in theory, I am open to changing my mind.